On today's episode of Behind the Wheel with Chad.
So good evening, and welcome on this 9-degree uh, winter February night. And obviously, I'm not behind the wheel tonight. I'm in my basement, and I wanted to kind of talk about a topic that came up. I saw on social media all over the place earlier today, and it was a topic about how the antique car, or the classic car, and the hot rod hobby has kind of um, it's dying in a way that young people aren't getting into it and all that sort of thing. So I wanted to take a minute and talk about that because I hear it a lot. I'm in a classic car hot rod club, small local club, and we've been talking about this for a long time. And I'm middle aged. I'm 45 years old, and I've been in this club now for over 25 years, almost 30 now. So I was in it, and I started out when I was a teenager, and I've been in it ever since. And I want to kind of walk through that a little bit because I've been thinking about this afternoon as it came up, and um, so I saw it as a teenager growing up, and I grew up working in the garage with my dad. My grandfather was a mechanic. My dad was a mechanic. But they weren't into classic cars per se. By the time I came around, they were just mechanics. My dad was a hot rodder back in the 50s, when he was a teenager. So he was there when it was really going on, and he and I had discussions about that back in the 50s, or about his experiences as, a young guy in the 50s in the hot rodding scene. But I wanted to kind of talk through this a little bit. I jotted down some notes I wanted to kind of go through. And I'm also testing out this new microphone system, this new wireless mic. So I'm interested to see how that does. So I hope it works out. We'll see. But so back to this topic, um, is the classic car hot rod scene dying for lack of young people? I've mixed feelings about that. Um, when we go to the NSRA events, so we usually go to one of the big shows every year, pretty well every year, depending on what's going on. A lot of times we'll go to the NSRA East York, PA. A good friend of ours goes to the uh, event up north in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we comment the same thing. There's way more gray hair there than there is young people in the NSRA events. And I think it's just because of the culture and the people in that club and that sort of thing. Because when we go to Good Guys, we see a big, broader mix of people. There's a lot of young people there. There's a lot of older guys there, a lot of older folks there. But there's a lot more of a mix of people at the Good Guys events. And you also see a lot more of a mix at some of the other things. Um, the videos and things that you see from like the big events in the big cities in the winter, that they have in the convention centers and things with the real high end cars. You see a broader mix there. I think a lot of people are looking for places to take their kids in the winter and that sort of thing, which gets me to one of the points that I was going to make. So the first point I wanted to talk about in this topic is just the general in this. So in this article that was released and was all over social media earlier today, there was a discussion about the overall attitudes of car people, and basically the author of this article was pointing the finger at the older generation in the car culture, the classic car and hot rod culture, pointing the finger at them. They said it's your fault, it's our fault, that we're not getting our young people involved, and I think that that's half true. So the attitudes of the car people. Basically, he was pointing at the finger at the attitudes of the older folks in the car culture. And one thing that I do agree with is that we talk about a lot here in our local area. We have a fairly active Facebook group for our local geographical area here in eastern Ohio, northern West Virginia. And one thing that's talked about is there's countless numbers of cars stashed away in garages that haven't seen the light of day in 50 years. And that's mind blowing to me. As someone who loves my classic cars, gets them out and drives them all the time to the grocery store, to the bike trail, anywhere and everywhere I get an opportunity, I'm driving these cars. But um, there's a lot of people that their cars haven't seen the light of day in many years and they don't even run. So I do agree with that. I think that, if you enjoy this hobby, get your stuff out and drive it. Don't be piling your stuff on your cars in your garages, stuffing them away in your basement, putting all your stuff on it, collecting dust. Oh, by the way, they don't run. It take a lot of work to get them running again. That if you're doing that, it's not a priority, and you can't complain when your kids aren't into it. So that's the thing. So number one, get your cars out and drive them. Keep your cars in relative maintenance and get them out and drive them because you know what? You're going to catch yourself with a smile on your face. Um, so that's a thing. The other thing that I see is that you know I'm a manager of people in the workplace. A lot of these people are younger. I see that these people are out experiencing things. They want experiences. You know, they're not big on possessions per se, but they want experiences. So, and I can understand that because when I was young, I wanted that too. I don't think that that's changed a lot in the past 30 years or so, um, and maybe even longer than that. I think that young people want experiences, but obviously they're not going to have a tremendous amount of money to be making big purchases of expensive cars. But what they can do is it's up to us to invite people along. And hey, you want to take a ride? You want to ride shotgun as we go to these places and things? Allow them to experience it. I agree with that. And the other thing too is if you have young kids, get them out in the garage with you. So many people don't do that. I see and hear a lot of people talking about electronic devices. The kids are on their switches and they're on their phones and they're on whatever electronic devices, tablets and stuff. And people are talking about that and all the kids aren't outside and all this sort of thing. Well, that's part true. I mean, I think kids are very involved in sports. I think kids are involved in soccer and other sports as much as ever, in little league baseball and all that sort of thing. But you know, if you're in the car culture, get your kids, or if you're older, get your grandkids involved out in the garage helping you do stuff. I think that they would love it. And take them for rides in the cars. Take them to the baseball game in your old car. Take them to the soccer field in your old car. I take my car to the soccer field here all the time. I walk there in the evenings. I've got my old cars there. And, my cars aren't show winning $200,000 cars. And, if they get bumped with a soccer ball or something, it's not the end of the world to me. But, that's another key point. I see everybody in this, not everybody. There's a lot of people in this hobby, the car culture hobby, who I think that there's this feeling like if they don't have a nice $100,000 trophy winning car, that they're not really a part of the scene. And I totally disagree with that because some of the most fun stuff that we do and some of the people who are having the most fun in this hobby and in this car culture are people who have what we call jalopies. So these jalopies, the paint's not perfect. There's the patina movement that's been taking place over the past 10 years or so, whether you agree with that or not. People are driving cars that aren't perfect by any means. They're mechanically safe, they run good, The paint finish isn't so good, and the interior is not so good. I mean, it's passable, but we're having a blast driving these cars. We love the history of the car. We love driving it, and it slaps a smile on our face. So there's that aspect as well. So what's our expectations? If you have an expectation that the only vehicle that you want is going to be something that you're extremely proud of, that you can be winning shows with and that sort of thing, that's fine. There's whatever makes you tick, but we can't expect young people to come into this hobby, into this car scene, and be able to whip out $100,000 or even $50,000 on a nice slick paint car. So, but these people can be driving these, whatever you'd want to call it, patina cars, rat rods, daily driver kind of quality cars. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I've had a mix of vehicles. I've never had anything super nice because number one, I could never really afford it. And number two, I didn't want it. I've had cars with brand new, fresh paint jobs. I built an S10 pickup truck with a V8 engine in it. It's kind of like a hot rod, and I put a very nice, slick paint job on it, fresh paint, redid it all. Um, it was a nice truck, and I got bored with it quickly. It moved on down the road. The cars that I love and have fun with now, I got a 56 Chevy 4-door. It's nice. It was restored probably 30 years ago, or not really even restored, but it got a decent quality paint job on it probably 30 years ago. It's a respectable car. It's a 4-door. It's certainly not high in demand. And guess what? We have an absolute blast in this car. It's an inline six and I put an overdrive, original 3 on the tree overdrive transmission. We drive this car down the interstate 70 mile an hour. We have a blast. I put one of these retro, sound radios in it, custom audio sound radios. We play Bluetooth music. I could do hand-free phone calls. We're having a blast in this car. We're playing music. We're taking it on road trips. It's been to York, Pennsylvania, to the NSRA show. Having a blast. I had and sold a 1953 GMC pickup truck that was pretty ratty looking. I mean, I patched some holes. I slapped some rattle can paint on it. I updated all the mechanicals. I put a 350 Chevy engine with an overdrive transmission. And it was a 1-ton GMC pickup truck with a 9-foot bed, and it sat high. That truck got so much attention you wouldn't believe. Uh, Total cost I had into that truck probably $18,000. Certainly was not going to win any awards. That truck went to Louisville, Kentucky. That truck went, which from here is 5.5 hour drive. York, Pennsylvania. That truck went to Worcester, Ohio. All sorts of different things and events. And that truck, we traveled in it, and we had no trouble with it. I'd updated all the brakes, all the mechanicals, all the wiring, and all that sort of thing. Did it myself. Um, didn't have a tremendous amount of money in it. That truck got more waves, honks, and thumbs up than you could imagine. We had a blast in it. Kids liked it. Everyone loved it. A girl I went to school with, she was an amateur photographer. She was taking photographs with it one year for Christmas. It was kind of a backdrop for photographs for people for family pictures. So, you don't have to spend a fortune to get into this hobby. I think that's a huge misconception. Um, my Chevy car, uh, I paid something like 10.5 for it, to be honest. Just being open and transparent. This Hudson, I paid slightly more for it. I have a 1949 Hudson Commodore that I bought. Both cars, they'll go down the interstate. This Hudson goes down the interstate 75 miles an hour. This Hudson that I bought it basically sight unseen off of pictures from Wildrick Restorations in Indiana. um, top Hudson shop probably in the country as far as Hudson restorations and parts and things like that. But anyway, they sold it basically as a favor for the car owner who lived overseas. And this car, driver quality at best, but mechanically solid, body solid, paint poor. So I've been kind of touching up the paint and just kind of making it look more presentable and clean. Cleaned up the interior, put new carpet in it this winter, new door panel, new cloth on the door panel, touching up a lot of paint and things like that just to make it clean. Um, Made a huge difference. This car, we went out, me and a friend of mine and my wife drove 5.5, 6 hours out to Shelbyville, Indiana. Hopped in this car, dirt, dust, and all. Drove it 5.5, 6 hours home. No real problems. Um, really, no problems at all to speak of. And so, you can't be afraid to get in these cars and drive them. Now, in that situation, in both situations, I knew that the cars were mechanically good. The people I bought them from, they'd gone over things, they kept them maintained. So that's a thing. And, the maintenance on these cars, they're not hard to work on. For the most part, you can get parts for these cars and that sort of thing. So that's not a big concern. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions for the public out there with it too. If you're a person who has never been into the classic cars or the hot rods and that sort of thing, there's a lot of misconception about it. Um, there, people feel like, oh, do you take them to car shows? No, I've never entered my car in a car show. Car shows to me are, those trophy winning, super high end cars and that sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not what I'm into. I'm into taking it to stuff for the experiences, which is kind of back to my point. For young people want the experiences. So we're driving these things all summer to the ice cream shops, to the grocery store, to the bike trail where I go walk, all these things. I'm driving both of my cars all over the place. I keep them maintained, change the oil, you know, do put, grease in all the grease fittings and all that sort of thing. These cars are not hard to work on. You can take these to any shop. You can get parts. I mean, the internet, there's parts distribution houses all over the internet that you can buy for pretty much any make of classic car or hot rod. Um, you know, there's not a ton of Hudsons out there. Just as an example, my Hudson. There's not a ton of these cars out there. I have no idea how many are out there, but there's a club with probably 15, 20,000 members, if I had to guess. And these people have connections, and there's companies like Wildrick Restoration who have parts for these cars. And so you can get things, and you can get rebuilt parts and that sort of thing. And it's not super expensive. And really, when you think about it, when you look at your hobbies and that sort of thing, if you have a pontoon boat, my family, my dad was into boats. We had, fishing boats and all that sort of thing. Classic cars are probably cheaper than boats. So that's a thing. And if your family's taking a lot of vacations and stuff, the classic cars, I mean, really, you could drive your classic car on vacation. There's no reason you can't take your classic on vacation. You can retrofit air conditioning if that's a thing for you. You can put modern radios and that sort of thing. My 1949 Hudson, I sent the radio down to a company in Florida, and they put all modern components in the old radio, and so it gets modern FM radio stations. It has wireless Bluetooth, all that sort of thing. So my 1949 Hudson with a 6-volt positive electrical system has hands-free Bluetooth built into the original radio. So you know you can do these things, and both of my cars run well, they stop well, and simple to work on, that sort of thing. So expectations of people in the culture. So let's talk about that for a minute. I hear this kind of attitude. People have this defeated attitude about, well, the hobby's dying, the car culture is dying. Okay, what are our expectations? Because so is NASCAR racing, and so is pretty much most things that people used to think of as iconic, super popular things. You know, I remember 20 years ago, we were big NASCAR fans. We'd go to a lot of races, at least one a year. And the races were packed full of people. Okay. And it was a very popular sport. You go to work on Monday, everybody was talking about the NASCAR race. People who weren't even traditionally stock car racing fans or auto racing fans loved NASCAR. And the Lowe's driver, the DuPont driver. Everybody talked about Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Rusty Wallace. Their favorite beer was light beer, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. had come onto the scene, and not only was he Dale Earnhardt's son, but he was sponsored by Budweiser, and all this stuff, and it was super popular. Well, about 5 years ago or so, that popularity dropped off pretty steep. And everybody was scratching their head as to why, because NASCAR was this big, huge thing, and at one point it was probably bigger than NFL football in popularity. And certainly there were a lot more people at the NASCAR race than there were in these NFL football stadiums for NFL football games and that sort of thing. And it what happened? So a lot of people scratched their head about that, and people in the NASCAR business and all that sort of thing were scratching their head. Well, I think that in today's society, we see it in a lot of different things. I'm heavily involved in our church. We talk about it all the time in our church. Many, 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 many people have left the church in the past 20 to 30 years. There's so much competition for people's time and attention. Electronic devices, sports events for the kids. There's a set of soccer fields very close to my house. When I drive by these soccer fields and during soccer season, the lots are jam packed full of people. There's six, five, six, 7 games, whatever, going on at that time, and hundreds of cars there at these fields. The place is jam packed to the walls. People are heavily involved in their kids' activities. So, these things are taking away from, and then, there's Netflix, there's all these things. Where 25 years ago, we didn't have all this stuff. You could watch television, but there wasn't nearly as much on TV 25 years ago, even 20, 25 years ago. There wasn't the Netflix, there wasn't all this stuff. Now, people, especially after the pandemic, people are hooked on Netflix and people are hooked on their games on their tablets and their cell phones and, social media, Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and all this. So all these hobbies and things suffer as a result of that. And there's so many things to see and do in today's society. There's so many events and so many things competing for our precious time and energy. So that's a thing. The other topic or thing I wanted to bring up was Barrett Jackson. So this is a hot topic because the Barrett Jackson in Scottsdale, Arizona was just, a few days ago or last weekend, I guess. And this has been a hot topic all over social media and the car culture, the car scene. The price of cars in Barrett Jackson. And I don't have it pulled up on my phone right now to go through some of the values of the stuff, but it was a very popular topic this week amongst car people is, man, look at how much these cars and trucks and stuff are selling for. I remember there was like a 72 Chevy Blazer that went across the auction block and it sold for something like $160,000. And don't quote me on that. I don't have it all memorized, but it was just an insane number. And there were so many cars going across like that. There were, I think, at least 3 cars that went for over $1 million. Um, to each his own. If you're into that car and it's a super rare car, and if it's something you want in your collection, there was a lot of discussion about all this in the car circle, in the car scene. And, there's a lot of talk about, the economy and all this sort of thing. You know, since the pandemic, there's been a flood of cash floating around in the world of business and trickling its way into people's hands. These PPP loans that came about as a result of this pandemic, there's a lot of money out there that certain people have, and they're spending it on tangible things that are not the stock market. Okay, so most of us have 401ks or retirement or whatever, um, or even if you're young and you're just getting into it, the stock market's pretty choppy right now, not so good, and a lot of us have lost you know money out of our retirement in the stock market. So people are taking money and saying, "Well, the stock market don't look so hot. I want to put it in something else tangible that's appreciating." Well, guess what? These rare, nice, classic cars are appreciating in a lot of cases. I use Haggerty Auto Insurance for my classic cars. I really like Haggerty. They offer a very nice magazine. They have a very, very nice valuation tool. And um, as part of that valuation tool, they track the values of these things. And in the magazine, they run articles talking about what the values of these things are projected to be. So they have certain models, certain years of cars that they think are going to appreciate really well, and some that are just kind of be stagnant. So you see people reading and researching this, and then they follow up and they buy these things and they're investing it and they're treating these classic cars like investments. I think 25, 30 years ago, I don't know that that was the case as much. I think some of these people, they liked certain cars and things and they collected them for that reason, not necessarily because they were looking at it as a financial investment per se, but they were looking at this stuff saying, I like, Chevy, 57 Chevys, or I like, whatever year Fords or whatever. Pick the car, pick the truck, vehicle, whatever. They bought them because they liked them, or sentimental reasons, whatever. That's why they collected them. Now, and we're especially seeing it overseas. There's a lot of foreign people with a lot of money. There's a lot of wealth over in like Saudi Arabia, for example, and in the Middle East and in Abu Dhabi and places where there's millions of dollars, and these people are buying these cars for their personal collections. So that's a thing too. Um, I Where do I think this is going to go? I think number one, my recommendation is, if you're an average guy like me, I'm on the low end of this in this hobby. I'm not spending tremendous amount of money. I've got two cars. They're average quality at best. They're driver quality, and I'm fine with that. I catch myself smiling in the mirror when I drive my cars. I look forward to driving my cars. And, it's 9 degrees out. It's early February here. It's going to warm up early next week. I'm looking forward to that because my cars are going to be on the road. And so, where do we go with this? Number one, if you want young people into this, invite them along, get them involved, take them for rides, um, go to that ice cream shop, take them to their soccer games in your old car. Get your kids out into the garage with you and help you work on stuff. You know, my opinions on electronic devices are mixed. I've got tablets, I've got cell phones, computers, all this stuff. There's a time and a place for it. I think that overexposure, having your kids overexposed to things, in my opinion, not the best idea, especially the TikToks and things like that. I think you need to limit that. And I think you need to expose your kids to experiences because that's what they were really craving. They want the experiences, and you can do that live and in person by exposing your kids to classic cars, hot rods, taking them for on road trips. get them involved in it. Have them help you work on it. So that's my opinion on this thing. I don't think it's dying. I think that we have to kind of meter our expectations and base it on reality. And we have to do our part. We have to put our energy and time into it, just like any other thing, any other relationship or hobby that we have. You have to invest some sweat and put some skin in the game, and then you can see some results. So that's my challenge to the car culture and to the car hobby. Um, we need to check our attitude, improve our attitude, and then we'll see some better results. And the one other thing I want to get back to too before I finish for tonight is back to my original comments about when I was a teenager and how I got into this hobby. I started hanging around with the local car club through a very good friend, my best friend in high school. He and his dad were part of a small local car club. They had a 57 Chevy and a 69 Camaro. And I was like, man, I really enjoyed it. And we'd go to the local cruise ins and stuff. And I'd ride along with him. His dad was active in getting us involved in the cars. So that was great. That was a great experience. Then we went to college, got married, bought a house, did all those things. My friend had kids, 4 kids. So we both had gotten out of the hobby a little bit. We didn't completely remove ourselves from it. It's just we couldn't afford to have classic cars. So we were still in it. We would go to the cruisins and stuff with our friends who did have the cars, but we weren't involved in all the activities. We weren't going to all the events. We weren't traveling to the big stuff um, because we were busy working. We were busy doing our day to day thing. Paying the house payment. Putting food on the table. But what happened was after a period of time, as we kind of got ourselves established, then we came back to the hobby in more of a force. That's when I bought, my I built my S10 V8 S10 pickup truck. Then I got the 1953 GMC. Then I got my 56 Chevy. Then I got my Hudson. Um, and so, you kind of your kids might drift away from it while they're out there getting married, going to college, all that stuff. It happens when we're young adults. But then as they get older, then they gradually come back to the hobby. So we have to kind of control our expectations and be real about that because people have to get themselves established in life in order to be able to do it. But I think we have to realize and be okay with people just having lower quality paint jobs on their cars and just having driver quality stuff, getting out there and enjoying it and building yourself up just like you do anything else. Build yourself up in it, and then you can progress. And so we have to kind of break down these stereotypes and these stigmas of things, and just bring it back to where the average family can afford to do this kind of a thing, and then we'll see results in the hobby. So that's my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I encourage you to leave your own comments and thoughts to this video. I hope my microphone worked okay. We'll find out. But so in the future, I plan to do some more ride-alongs and kind of narrate and have discussions like these while I'm driving the cars. Kind of talk more about the cars, talk more about the events that we're going to as we go to them, and all that sort of thing throughout the spring and summer. So thank you if you've listened this long. Thank you. Put some comments down below, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.